Hello there guys, what is going on? SonOfChelsea back here again for another episode of Let's Talk Chelsea. The first in quite a while. It's great to be doing an episode of Let's Talk Chelsea after a big Chelsea win. Not the greatest performance by any stretch. In some ways, a lot of luck. If you haven't seen my rational perspective on the game, please go and watch it now, where I give sort of a 14-minute review and reaction to the game. Obviously, today we'll be covering a little bit more of that, going into some of the key stats from some good performances yesterday. I also want to be touching on the Antonio Rudiger and Andreas Christensen contract situation. I feel like in terms of transfers, even as we get close to January, I feel like this is the biggest story and most relevant one. I feel it is constantly brought up after every game because I think it's the biggest fear of Chelsea fans in terms of that contract situation in the defence and kind of some of the events and stories we've seen over the recent days regarding Rudiger, regarding Christensen, my feelings on the way the club has handled, I think, both situations. So I'll give you my thoughts on them. Before we do get into today's episode, I want to give a massive thank you to Lucid FC, who have supported this channel through 2021. We're coming up to the end of 2021. I can't believe it. But right at the start of 2021, Lucid FC, just amazing guys. Bets and Jet D Hart, the way they've supported the channel, the way they've supported my content, supported what I've done. As you can see, wearing the lovely crest logo that I've had since the start of the year, and especially as it gets cold in the UK, it really warms me up, especially even inside. It's started to get really freezing in the UK. But I just want to say a massive thank you. So the link to Lucid FC is in the description box below. You can get a special discount code using CFC at checkout for a $15 or £12 discount. So please go and support the guys at Lucid FC. Wonderful people, Chelsea fans as well. So absolutely buzzing, of course, after yesterday's win. And look out for their new collections over the winter and heading into the new year. But let's look at the game firstly. Some key stats. Mason Mount, who scored yesterday, some stats from his performance yesterday. He's been directly involved in 10 Premier League goals this season. 100% shot accuracy for his goal, 89% pass accuracy, 47 touches, 5 crosses, 4 touches in the opposition box, 4 duels, 1, 2 shots on target, 2 tackles, and of course 1 goal. Mason Mount has scored more Premier League goals than any other Chelsea player this season, which is quite an incredible stat. 6. It's only his 9th start of the campaign. He's had a really uncharacteristic start to the season in terms of his Chelsea career, because he's been such a mainstay in the team, very much a player you can rely on in terms of fitness, in terms of that level of performance. And I think it's a variety of things. Obviously he had the tooth operation, I think it was around October, wasn't it? He had some injury problems, he's had illness. I think the workload he's had as a young player, considering how much he's played for Chelsea, on top of that how much he plays for England, being such a vital player for both club and country, I think it's probably taken its toll, as it has on other players in this squad. Jorginho is another example of a player who just looks overloaded, as Tuchel calls it, at this time of the year, and it's completely understandable. But to see him getting back to these levels again, and even when he was being criticised in the early weeks of the season, I think some of his underlying numbers in terms of expected assists, in terms of the way he was influencing Chelsea's play, still showed you how important he is to this team, and especially now at this period of the season, he's going to be absolutely key. So it's great to see him getting back into his best form. A player I credited as my man of the match, I don't think there were many obvious ones yesterday, to be honest, because it wasn't an amazing performance, was Ruben Loftus-Cheek. And this is kind of demonstrated by his numbers here from Squawka. Most duels won, most ball recoveries, most tackles, most fouls won, most shots, most take-ons. So I think the way, especially against a pressing team like Leeds, the way he's able to evade a press, especially with his physique. What I loved Ruben, it kind of summarised the physicality of the game. So many times just able to get his body in the way of a Leeds player, being able to shift through difficult moments and get through tight spaces, which his trickery and skill has always allowed him to do, and that power that really helps him drive through the middle. As I say, I still think that final pass can be a lot better from Ruben. I look at someone of a similar mould, not completely similar, but say Mateo Kovacic, who I think we need back. This season, Mateo has started to put that final ball. The stats, show how much of an influential player he's been for Chelsea so far. Final pass, and that's what I feel like Ruben probably needs to add to his game to really make him a guaranteed starter, because I think what he has over a lot of other midfielders currently at Chelsea is that physique, is that power, is that dominance that he can have from a deeper position, those drives for right. I don't think many players have that, and to have that skill set, if he can add that final pass, if he can also that final shot as well, is another thing. I feel like Chelsea from a deep area and this has been a frustration for many years, basically since Frank has left, is more goals from central midfield. And I feel like Ruben can be that as well. I don't know if he's being advised not to shoot at times, and that's a general thing with Tuchel. The sort of control that Tuchel wants, the sort of the build-up, the patient build-up at times, whether he's being advised not to shoot from distance, but I'd like to see that a little bit more increased. But for Ruben, the story of Ruben this season, I still think is incredible, given where he was. Even the biggest fan of Ruben, like myself, was doubting his chances at Chelsea. And to see him now a regular in the first team it's an incredible story. Tuchel, obviously, after the game, spoke about the importance of the win. Rudiger's antics, which I spoke about yesterday. Jorginho sacrificing himself, the pain that probably Jorginho's playing through at the moment, which is why it's so vital that we're going to be having N'Golo Kante back in training on Tuesday. And then Mateo Kovacic probably coming out of COVID isolation. Not quite sure how hard COVID is hit. Obviously, Kovacic, if it's been a really serious illness. We think about long-term COVID, the impact on Kai Havertz last season. We need to wait to see to that. But let's hope that both can be available over the Christmas period, because it's so key that we can potentially give Jorginho a rest. But I think the concern is, as we've seen in recent weeks, without those other options, when you take Georgie out of the team, that connection to the rest of our play kind of dwindles a lot. So that's kind of the concern. But as I said at the start, I want to speak about Rudiger and I want to speak about Christensen. Firstly, Antonio Rudiger, who's obviously been amazing in 2021. I mean, in terms of the Chelsea player of 2021, he has to be up there, doesn't he, in terms of a consistent level of performance since January to now. And he's ending the year strong. He had a few dodgy performances, I felt, against Watford. I didn't think he had his best day, and against West Ham. I do think some of that is the fact that Ben Chilwell isn't there, because him and Rudiger have really formed a great partnership all the way back, I think, since like March, when finally Chilwell came into the team under Tuchel. And I feel like those two have worked so well together. There's just I think their ability, and I think their chemistry, I think, is so well found on that side. And it's the same with, Chilwell when he moves forward, the connections he has to, say, the left winger, if it's Callum Hudson-Odoi that we saw in the autumn. But Rudiger has been outstanding. He really has. The contract situation is a concern, and we saw from The Athletic this week from Simon Johnson, Real Madrid emerging as favourites to sign Rudiger for free with no fresh Chelsea talks held. Real Madrid are growing in confidence that Chelsea defender Rudiger will sign a pre-contract with them in January and join on a free transfer next summer. So I feel like, especially after games like yesterday and in recent times when Rudiger has been such a dominant figure, instantly the reaction is get Rudiger to sign a contract. Why aren't we getting him to sign a contract? It's a no-brainer. As I've written for Football London, and as I've probably said on this channel before, I'm not quite sure if I've done as many videos on it this season, but I've definitely said it on streams I've done for Carefree Chelsea. I don't think it's as simple. I can understand the club's stance with being hesitant to give Rudiger upwards of like 400 grand a week because of his age, mainly, is kind of my doubt. And also, and maybe this ties to Christensen to it in terms of the system that's really suiting him, a back-free system. And my thing that I've brought up with Chelsea and transfers and squad planning and the way we build and look to the future is, can you say to me right now Chelsea will be playing the same system in 2 years' time, even a year's time, if Tuchel, say, is still here and he wants to evolve the system into, say, a 4-3-3 or a 4-2-3-1 or something like that? Does that suit Antonio Rudiger? And if Chelsea are going to hand Rudiger this massive contract, right when he's playing the best football of his career in a system that I think perfectly gets the best out of him, because he is an erratic defender at times. He is someone that likes to drive with the ball, which is something that Chelsea fans love seeing, that his marauding runs forward, that he has more license to do in a back three. But when we used to play in a back four, especially under Frank Lampard and even under Sarri at times, you'd see him make those darting runs forward and then be caught out of position. I even felt in the second half, in the lead up to Leeds equaliser, you saw that again, and even with a back three system, Thiago Silva wasn't quick enough to cover around, and that's how they got the equaliser. There are moments like that that make me think that this system is perfectly suited, and there's a few players like that under Tuchel. It's a genius of Tuchel's work in 2021 at Chelsea, and that's my concern. We've seen it with other clubs like Barcelona handing a massive contract to a player entering their 30s. Their form potentially plummets, and then you struggle to get them off the wage bill. That's what I'm sure Chelsea are thinking of right now, and especially given the way we've looked at players like Jules Koundé in the market. Chelsea looking to the future. Levi Colwill out on loan currently with Huddersfield. thinking beyond just the next 6 months, the next 12 months, looking beyond that. And I think that's a smart thing to do for Chelsea. But obviously, Rudiger, it's those intangible elements too that make him, I think, such a big part of the current dressing room. Those things that I speak about a lot that I don't think are appreciated enough in terms of the mentality. These can feel like quite sort of shallow words, but I feel just the way he's able to drag players up and being able to, in those moments like yesterday when Chelsea are really struggling to get the right result, he's marauding forward. He's getting involved with fights. He's a confrontational player. I think he lifts the energy of players around him and the level of performance that drives him on to, and has drove him to become one of the best defenders in Europe. So I don't think it's simple, but I absolutely understand why Chelsea losing him could be a massive blow, especially if we don't replace him with a player of an adequate level and also influence and leadership in the dressing room, which isn't always easy to find, especially with a younger player. Because you do think if Rudiger leaves, the replacement, or at least the player we'd bring in to replace him in the squad rather than just left centre-back, would be, say, Jules Koundé, a younger defender who you feel like would take a long time potentially to get to that level of influence in the dressing room again. And Rudiger is a very unique individual. But I move on to Christensen now because I just feel, at the time I wrote a reaction piece when Tuchel gave those comments about him being left out because of this contract situation, which is completely different to Rudiger in terms of him being at the table with Chelsea, but potentially his team going back and forth, and Chelsea feeling like and being aggravated by the fact that Chelsea felt like they had agreed a deal like twice, and then Christensen's team, reverse things and throw a spanner in the works basically, and they're still negotiating. And Tuchel coming out and publicly questioning Andreas Christensen's commitment. At the time, I was kind of like a little bit more sort of diplomatic about it in my article for Football London, where I was like, I can kind of understand maybe it's Tuchel as a coach. He knows he knows what he's doing because he knows he would have backing from the club to do this, to say this publicly. Tuchel is not just going to go out there and say stuff. He's usually very, very coy on transfers. And some of the quotes he gave about Rudiger on Friday night when he was asked about this contract was, once again, very suave, very limited, very coy about things, not committing himself, which is why when he goes out on a limb with Christensen, I think it indicates to me that he ain't doing that without knowledge that he's got backing from above to do that. But the more I felt about it, the more toxic I think that decision was, not only from Tuchel to say that, but also from the club. More so with the social media reaction, where it became very easy for people to label Christensen a villain. Like to think, and I fully know that Chelsea, at least the PR side of Chelsea, the people at Chelsea who know how social media is, probably know, and maybe they deny it, but they know how that would have been reacted to online, and how easy it is for people to make players the villains in the modern game. The amount of abuse that players get on a regular basis, that's not their responsibility, but I think Chelsea should have known what that could have done, the reaction to that. I don't think it was a smart move in the end by Tuchel. Easy to link Christensen's drop in form with the contract situation and say that's the reason. We don't know. There could be other factors, fitness, just him dropping form recently, and that's been a coincidence. Now, at the time, when we linked this to Rudiger, the logic that was being sold by the club, at least from people like Matt Law, very trusted sources, I'm guessing this is what was being briefed by people internally at the club, is that, well, the reason why Rudiger's commitment to Chelsea isn't being questioned is because his stance on the contract front has been consistent. He just isn't coming to the table. That may sound good to some people, and that may spin some people and convince some people that that's a logical argument. Didn't convince me over time. It's just a nonsense argument that the fact that the guy who isn't coming to the table at all is more committed than the guy who is at the table. And sure, you have some issues with the contract situation and it's going back and forth, but he's at the table. Christensen has kind of indicated he'd like to stay at Chelsea. It's just nonsense. I could go more strong on it than that, but it's just absolute nonsense that argument was sold. And the fact that people brought it up is kind of a bit sad, to be honest, because to me, the guy who's at the table negotiating a contract with you is the more committed one, at least in my opinion. Now, I'm not trying to make Rudiger the villain here. I feel there is too much entitlement from supporters in terms of towards players' commitment. I've said this on the channel before. I think in the modern game, it's healthier to understand that players are going to move around. Coaches are going to move around. Christensen and Rudiger are under no obligation to sign new contracts at Chelsea. If they leave at the end of the season, I think you just have to understand that that's the situation. They're going to move on, and Chelsea, as a big club, have the finances to replace those players, or at least get players from the academy into the first team who could hopefully replace them with quality. Christensen Christensen does not have to sign every single contract offered to him. He's allowed to say no. His team is allowed to say no. It's just one of those things that just in the modern game, the entitlement is just incredible to me, and it's just one of these things that, once again, that public stance really baffled me from the club, because there's a lot of people on social media who, I don't think in the most positive way, but back the club has kind of become a bit of a meme on Twitter. And I think they knew that Christensen would have been painted as a villain. People would have seen it in a very binary way. That Christensen was maybe doing something toxic towards the club, and I think it was the wrong move. And I just think for Tuchel and for the club at the time, I don't think it's the best thing to publicly say. I don't know why Christensen and Rudiger we can't just get the same stance. You know, whatever's going on behind the scenes, I think keeping it behind the scenes is better. I don't blame Rudiger for his stance, because a bit like Christensen, he's hit the best form of his career. He's in a very strong negotiating position. So I don't blame Rudiger for at this point where he's about to get the final big contract of his career, asking for the most. He's just been a part of a Champions League winning squad. He was amazing in the Champions League winning run. He's been amazing for most of this season so far. So I don't blame Rudiger for seeing that and going, I'm going to get the best and the most out of this contract at this point of his career, because footballers do have a short career. You know, he could get a massive injury in the coming years and it derails, you know, the remaining years of his contract. Or it just, you know, I don't blame footballers at this level for doing that, because there is two sides to the story. You know, as much as fans get annoyed at players for commitment, there also is the case where clubs, you know, maybe feel aggravated that players aren't always signing the contracts, or maybe aren't always committed to those players as well. So I think there's a lot more nuance to this situation, and I just wanted to say that on the Christensen situation, because I don't think it was the best look for the club. I know I'm probably in a minority here. I think a lot of people probably would have been annoyed at Christensen, and fair enough, that's your point of view. You can let me know in the comments. Those are my thoughts on today. Obviously, there are other transfer stories circling in terms of centre-backs. In terms of Asbury reached January, are Chelsea going to be proactive in the market? I'll be covering that on the channel. I'll be covering that on Football London as well. Please go and follow my work on there on Carefree Chelsea. Links will be in the description box below. But thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch this video on this Sunday. We'll be back again for some videos very soon on Son of Chelsea. Thank you as well for your kind comments on my video after a while yesterday. It was really nice to see. So please go and watch that review yesterday. Have a great Sunday, and I will see you again